Welcome to vocabulary lesson number 12. This is our second to last video. It's our third video of 4 for your final vocabulary additional assessment. Remember that there are 20 vocabulary words in each video, meaning that in this assessment, you'll actually be having 80 vocabulary words to remember, so a little bit of an extra challenge. So let's go ahead and get started. So our first word is going to be Jeopardy, which is a noun, and we're not talking about the television show, we're talking about danger. So here we have, based upon the projected pathway of the tornado, the town was in jeopardy. So notice how it's being used as a noun of being completely destroyed. Alright? So danger. Our next word is supercilious, which is an adjective. So supercilious is an adjective that means haughty or arrogant. So here we have the supercilious man could not understand that everyone might not agree that he was kind of a big deal. So supercilious is an adjective that describes this man as ultimately being arrogant, haughty, into himself, a little big-headed. So next up we have the noun avarice. So avarice means greed. So here we have a sentence example that says, the dog's avarice was clear. He refused to share any of, that should say his bones, with his fellow canines. So avarice is a noun, and it means greed. So you might remember earlier on we learned the word guile, which is also a noun. So these words, guile, avarice, they're used as nouns and not as adjectives. So make sure to keep that in mind. So our next word is pivotal, which is also an adjective, and it means important, critical, crucial. So you might have heard this as a pivotal moment in time, an important moment in time. So here we have our sentence, the spinning top is a pivotal symbol in the movie Inception. Understanding its figurative meaning brings viewers to a greater understanding of the movie. All right. So next up we have the word blithe, which is also an adjective, and it means free-spirited and carefree. So this might remind you of the word capricious, for instance, as they're very similar. So here we have baby Moana was a young and blithe spirit who felt no fear of the ocean, only kindredship. Alright, for our next word we have scrupulous, which is also an adjective, and it means careful, diligent, and moral. So this is an interesting collection of words. So let's see how they work in action. So here we have scrupulously cleaned, the kitchen shined and glimmered in the sunshine's rays, casted through the window. So here, scrupulous, which is being used as an adverb scrupulously, definitely goes along with the idea of careful and diligent. But this third meaning of moral means that the word can sometimes be used with the idea of her scrupulous virtue or her scrupulous decision-making. Therefore, make sure to keep in mind that there is a secondary way in which this word can be used, which is quite different from how our example is using it. For our next word, we have volatile, which is an adjective, which means changeable, unstable, and explosive. So, for instance, here we have measurements of increasing seismic activity confirms or corroborated, if you remember that vocabulary word, that the volcano was becoming increasingly volatile, making its eruption imminent. So volatile definitely can mean explosive in the literal sense. However, it can also be used figuratively for somebody's personality. So if you have a volatile personality, it means that you might erupt in anger at any moment. So keep that in mind, that it can be literal, like with a volcano. It can also be more figurative, like with a person's emotional state. So next we have voluminous, which is an adjective and means very large and spacious. So voluminous can deal with a building. For instance, if you have a voluminous room, it would be very large and tall. It would probably echoes. However, it can also be something smaller, such as a skirt, where this word is often used. As she spun in circles, the voluminous skirt caught the air, lifted upwards, and twirled about her in a vibrant swish of cloth. So if you have trouble remembering this word, an easy kind of something to trigger your memory is voluminous uses volume or volume. So if something has a lot of volume, it has a lot of space. So voluminous is simply an adjective form of that. Alright, so next up we have peripheral, which is an adjective, and it means on the edge, surrounding, unimportant. So we most often think of peripheral with peripheral vision. So for instance here, if you stare at the plus sign, it will cause your peripheral vision to confuse your brain, which then combines features from the different faces and makes them look distorted. I highly recommend trying this. It's super weird. So you can try it while I explain it, or if you go to the slides, you can try it without it being in the video. But peripheral is oftentimes linked with vision, but peripheral can also mean on the edge. So you could say the peripheral of the map. You could say the peripheral of the landscape. You could say the peripheral of her line of sight. So do know that peripheral is not always linked to vision. It is commonly, but that isn't the only way that it can be used. Alright, so our next word is hedonistic, which is an adjective, and it means pleasure-seeking and indulgent. So if you want to use this word as a noun, you would simply use hedonist. So the noun is hedonist and the adjective is hedonistic. So in this sentence, after years of hedonistic behavior, Emma struggled with the trust and loyalty necessary for a happy and healthy relationship. So next up we have amity, which is a noun that means friendship. So here we have, at the Model UN, students practice world amity through negotiation and diplomacy. So something to keep in mind, that amity is most commonly used when talking about political negotiations, especially amongst multiple countries. So that's most commonly when this word is used for the concepts of friendship. So next up we have benefactor, which is also a noun, and it's a generous donor, someone who helps. So a benefactor oftentimes practices benevolence. So here we have the fundraiser called upon benefactors from throughout the community to help feed students who experience food insecurity. There are a lot of typos in these. Sorry about that, guys. So next up we have apocryphal, which is a very new word you might not have encountered yet, and it is a noun, and it means a doubtful origin and mythical. So here we have apocrypha are works usually written of unknown authorship or of doubtful origin. The mythical flying buffalo is an apocryphal story that has been told for thousands of years. So very new words here, but these give you pretty good ideas of what they mean and how they are used. Alright, so next up we have one that's maybe a little more familiar, and it's slander, which is a verb. If you'd like to turn this into an adjective, it would be slanderous. So, slander means to defame, to speak maliciously of someone, and here we have it in a sentence. When Miss Crabapple accused Lisa of cheating on her exam, Lisa responded with her own accusation. "This is slander!" She knew Crabapple was trying to soil her good name as an excellent student. Alright. Next on up, we have the word animosity, which is a noun. So we have amity, which is a noun for friendship, and we have animosity, which is a noun for hatred. Alright, so here we have Andrew Clark felt intense animosity towards John Bender, going so far as to tell him, "You don't even count. I mean, if you disappeared forever, it wouldn't make any difference." That's the super mean thing to say. Don't ever say that to anyone. But one thing to know about animosity is it is very intense hatred. So you have hatred, and then you have animosity, which is hatred to an even higher degree, where you'd be willing to say something this mean to another person. Alright, so next up we have the word stringent, which is an adjective, and it means strict, harsh, and severe. So it has some similarities to the word austere. They're not exact, but they do have some similarities. So here we have Matilda's father practice a stringent parenting style, where he essentially chastised her for everything she did. So stringent has connotations of being unforgiving, of being very strict, so that should give you a good idea of how the adjective stringent works. It might remind you of the word astringent, so that you might have some familiarity there. So next up we have another word that's very similar to banal, and it's hackneyed. So again, banal, insipid, there's a ton of them that we've looked at. You're going to want to add hackneyed to that list of words. that mean that. There is also the word tedious, which would be on that list, so you might want to keep a list of things that mean boring. But here we have banal and overused. So the interviewer's hackneyed questions left Benedict Cumberbatch and Tom Hiddleston unenthused and bored. So hackneyed essentially means overused, and because it's been done so many times, it becomes boring, and we can see it on their faces. They're hearing questions that they've heard before, and while this guy is trying his hardest to look interested, we can still tell he's very bored, and he's not trying to hide it at all. He's very bored. So hackneyed. All right. Next up, we have amass, which is a verb, and it means to accumulate, to pile up. So the snow amassed, or they amassed an army. All right, and here we have, before being able to defeat Voldemort, Harry Potter would need to amass wizarding knowledge and skills at Hogwarts. All right, next up we have verbose, which is an adjective, and it means wordily or overly talkative. So here we have Kelly was the most verbose of the Dunder Mifflin employees. Once she starts talking, she never really starts. So somebody who's verbose is going to be someone who talks a lot and a lot and a lot and a lot. And also you can have verbose writing. If you've ever wrote a poem that kind of goes on and on and on and on, or kind of literature that rambles and is winding and flowery, you can also describe that as verbose. So next up we have trepidation, which is a noun that means fear. So here we have the prospect of the Krusty Krab being shut down forever left SpongeBob experiencing intense trepidation over how he would ever be able to pay his rent. So do keep in mind that trepidation as the T-I-O-N. So we've seen in the past that words that end with a T-I-O-N tend to be a noun. So keep in mind that this is used as a noun and not as an adjective. Alright, so those are our words for this lesson. You only have one more after this and then you are done. So good luck, make sure to use your practice slides, and thank you for watching.